Good afternoon, folks. If we can come back, got the live stream up and running. I'm going to go to Councillor Kerr to understand you got the amendment, Councillor Kerr.
I have convener to the recommendations with an item 3, where it's £40 for the uplift. Change that to £35. And for the item 8, £35 for the ground bin, 25. Our groups fought against this charge for years and years. However, today's climate, and I understand with regards to cost of living crisis, having a deficit of 67-69 million, decisions will have to be taken that are unpopular, and the decisions that we take today will hopefully benefit us going forward, whether it's this year or next year or the following year. So that's the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I'll go to Councillor Sinclair first for any comment in relation to the amendment.
Thank you, convener. I think we'd be content to adopt that. Adopt the amendment within the motion that stands, if that was agreeable.
Thank you, Councillor Garner.
Yes, I'm okay with that.
We'd be happy to accommodate that within motion these changes. But unless there's any other comments or questions, then perhaps just move to the vote. Councillor Bundy, sorry.
Seconded.
Oh, so I beg your pardon, yes.
Second.
Okay.
And also, just to follow up from what Councillor Kerr said, this is something that our party has opposed for a long time, but the situation that we're in financially means that we have to be pragmatic. We have to draw easy positions close to our heart, but we have to just be pragmatic and do what's best for the sustainable future of the council and our constituents, and that's why our amendments, which tries to strike that balance of reducing the financial burden that our constituents will be facing with these charges, but also getting some savings and incomes for the council. And we think that balance is the pragmatic approach. That's why we're putting forward and supporting the rest of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bundy. I do remember long conversations with both John Patrick and Malcolm Bickle in relation to bank bins on many occasions in relation to that. So thank you. There's no other questions or contributions. Move to the vote.
Yes, thank you, convener. And the motion is moved by Councillor Sinclair and seconded by Councillor Garner. And it consists of the recommendations within the report with a number of adjustments. So the first adjustment, which was moved initially by Councillor Sinclair, was to retain an environmental improvement fund at the level of £20,000 per annum. And as we've just heard, the motion has been adjusted at point 3 to reduce the figure from £40 to £35, and at point 8 from £35 to £25. Against which there is an amendment by Councillor Steinbach, seconded by Councillor Nimmo, which has been circulated. Councillor Bowes. Motion. Councillor Bundy. Motion. Councillor Devine.
Motion.
Councillor Garner,
Motion.
Councillor Hannah,
Amendment.
Councillor Kerr,
Motion.
Councillor Newton-John, Councillor Nimmo,
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson,
Amendment.
Councillor Sinclair. Motion. Councillor Spears
Amendment.
and Councillor Steinlein.
Amendment.
Because there are 7 votes for the motion, there are 5 votes for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Thank you. We stay within a waste portfolio and it's now food waste and absorbent hygiene products contract procurement strategy, and it's again double standard.
Thanks, Chair. So this paper relates to the requirement of Falkirk Council's contract standing order, section 6.2, to detail to the executive future major contract requirements for the council. This new contract seeks to create a more efficient curbside service in recognition of the forthcoming National Deposit Return Scheme. The executive is asked to approve the requirement to secure a curbside collection service for domestic food waste and absorbent hygiene products, and the cessation of the existing black box collections. The proposed term of the contract being 7 years, with an option to extend for a further 3-year period. This identified contract term aligns with the anticipated vehicle replacement programme for collection vehicles required to deliver contract requirements. Through financially incentivising the recycling on glass bottles, aluminium cans and clear plastic bottles through a national return scheme, the government aspire to recycle 90% of these container types, reducing the volume of waste sent to landfill and disposal. Falkirk Council is seeking a single contractor for the provision of all required infrastructure. This will include the provision of a depot, manpower, vehicles and all associated contract running costs to provide a weekly curbside food waste collection service and a 2-weekly collection of absorbent hygiene products, AHP. The anticipated annual contract value at commencement will be £1 million. The Council's current curbside black box and food waste contract will terminate on the 3rd of September 2023. The black box is a 2-weekly collection service provided for glass, textiles, small wee and household batteries. Domestic food waste is collected weekly alongside the scheduled, is collected weekly. The National Deposit Return Scheme for Scotland is scheduled to commence on the 16th of August 2023. This scheme, which will target drinks containers, negates the requirements for the collection of black box at the curbside. Householders will be able to return their used recycled containers to a retailer and receive a financial return of 20p for each returned container. Additionally, a network of automated reverse vending machines, RVMs, will also be established to accept the containers that fall within the scope of DRS and provide a financial return of 20p per container. Post DRS implementation, any remaining glass will be collected via the Council's wide network of recycling points. The recycling centres will also have provision for glass, textiles, small wee and household batteries. To highlight the changes to the service associated with the national programme, Falkirk Council will use a range of media to keep our householders fully advised, including social media, website updates, traditional media, workshops and advertising. We will work closely with colleagues at Zero Waste Scotland to ensure consistency of approach. Due to the timescales for a bidder to secure the infrastructure to meet council requirements, securing an early contract arrangement is required. The current black box and food collection contract cannot be extended beyond the term of the 3rd of September 2023. In conclusion, Falkirk Council require a procured solution to provide a 52-week curbside collection service to its domestic households within the Falkirk Council boundary. The changes detailed in the report will align to the forthcoming Deposit Return Scheme, which is integral to Scotland's route map towards a circular economy to 2025 and beyond. The Deposit Return Scheme has an implementation date commencing the 16th of August 2023, and the black box collection will cease from September 2023. That's a summary of the executive report, Chair.
Thank you, Douglas. Councillor Turner, Councillor Sinclair.
Thanks, convener. So thanks again to Douglas for work on this report and for his presentation there. Obviously, in line with their standing order, in line with their standing orders, this strategy report outlines a proposal from Reset, a contractual agreement for the provision of a domestic property curbside collection service comprising a weekly food waste collection and fortnightly EHP service from 4th of September 2023. Given the difficulty I'm having with my words at the moment, I'm not going to attempt to expand on what EHP is at the moment, but a contract period of up to 10 years. Of course, as Douglas has already alluded to in his presentation, the contract places the existing black box EHP food waste collection service, which can't be extended beyond the 3rd of September 2023. Additionally, this service would align with the introduction of the forthcoming deposit return scheme for Scotland, which will be a landmark moment in Scotland. As alluded to previously, there will be an engagement process over the coming months in preparation for that implementation, and I would expect all of us here in this room and across the wider council to support and take part in those engagement efforts. This will remove the requirement for glass, particular types of glass, to be collected at the curbside via the black box from August 23, and will enable carbon efficiencies and service delivery due to volume of material being collected and associated route structure. Of course, anything that can't be collected via the deposit return scheme, such as glass jars and remaining black box material or small electricals, will be accommodated at local recycling points and at council's household waste recycling centres, of which I believe, and Douglas will correct me if I'm wrong, there are over 90 across the district. I'm happy to move the report. And that's me.
Thank you, Councillor Secretary. Councillor Delma.
Thank you. Happy to second yourself.
Okay, thank you. I will now open it up for any questions or comments. Councillor Steinberg.
Thank you, convener. It's just a quick question for Douglas. I know at 5.3 that it's anticipated the location of the reverse vending machine to be identified in March 2023. Just because this seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, almost to be an addition to the sort of person taking the box and jars back to the retailer, could you perhaps just give an illustration of the volume of RVMs that will be required across the district? Perhaps how many per square mile across the district, or anything that could be reasonably quantified. Obviously, the location will be identified, but I imagine that will be based off demand.
The number of RVMs, Councillor, is yet to be confirmed. However, there is a requirement for retailers that sell those types of containers to either provide a take-back scheme or buy into a collective reverse vending machine. So there will be a wide network of RVMs and take back over the counter availability right across the district.
Second question, just a follow up on that. Well, is anticipate there'll be any RVMs that are not at retail locations?
We don't have the details yet, Councillor. No one has the details of that as yet with regards to the exact location of those RVMs. Again, that's something we're waiting to hear back from the national government.
Thank you, Douglas.
Thanks, convener. Couple of questions leading on from Steinbank's questions. When I know you said you haven't got any details as yet, but you've got to remember some of the places we've got in Falkirk District didn't have shops, and a lot of them did shop them online, so it would be difficult for them to return. And I'm sure that we're not going to have these RVM machines everywhere. There'll be specific places where they'll be placed. So the idea, I think the idea is a great idea, and if it cuts down on bottles and the plastic, great. But I have reservations at working, not right at the start, because everything has issues. With regards to some of these areas, well, they need planning permission for these machines and the holding areas for the product. Douglas.
Yep, Douglas.
Sorry, I'm just scribbling down the questions. The council councillor has a network of over 90 recycling points, and there's no plans at the moment to alter that. They are located both within our towns and villages and within our most rural communities as well. So there's a wide range of recycling points out there. In addition to that, the vast majority of your likes of your corner shop, your convenience shops will offer a take back system. The government has a target to capture 90% of this type of recycling, and again, I would highlight the fact that this type of system is commonplace within Europe and North America, and has proven to be a really successful way in collecting high quality recycling. With regards to planning permission, again, that's more one for Circularity Scotland to answer. I don't have I can't give you a definitive answer on that one at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay, just not a question, but just a comment. The places where you've mentioned are probably big areas that I'm talking about. Places in our wards, you're having inside Stanburn, Limerig, where there's no shops, there's nothing there. So how does these people return? Or is it going to be a joke for somebody to go and collect them all and take the 20 pences after them all? That could be a lucrative job.
Well, yeah, and I think that is the idea, Councillor, because they're the take back is financially incentivised. Then again, the majority of the recycle that is generated from people's waste will be taken, indeed be taken back. But if there are areas that don't currently have a recycling point and are in clear need of one, then we can certainly look at that.
Could be an avenue for the council to step in and.
I'm quite sure there's something we can do, Councillor, yeah. If we need to put some banks in, I'm quite sure we could do that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for being
Like you were looking at the income generation.
I was looking at the income generation for the council.
Sorry, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. I wonder if you could maybe just clarify, Douglas, please, because I have had questions asked by people who, and I think that there's been some mixed messaging has gone out, because there are still some people who think that the food waste is going to be put in with the brown bin waste, and there are still some people who, when this report came out, started asking, does that mean that the food waste is not going to be collected? Can you confirm that the food waste and absorbent hygiene products waste will continue to be collected on the same basis as currently?
Yeah, yes, Councillor Hannah, I'm pleased to confirm that food waste will be collected on a weekly basis, and AHP, absorbent hygiene products, for those families and individuals that require that service will be maintained also.
Thank you.
There's no other questions or comments. Are we happy to do the report? Okay, thank you. Next item is planning fees, introduction of discretionary charging, and it's Michael. Michael McGuinness, I think you're going to take this one, Michael.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Michael John. Thanks, convener. The purpose of the report in front of you is to introduce pre-application planning charges to help reduce and sustain an efficient, consistent and responsive planning service. By way of background, the Planning Scotland Act 2019 has introduced a number of changes to the planning system, including additional duties and requirements for Falkirk Council in its capacity as planning authority. This will have implications for the planning service and its delivery of these changes as they are introduced. We are currently awaiting Scottish Government guidance regarding the National Planning Framework and conscious of the additional duties that may place upon our officers. In consideration, the Town and Country Planning Fees for Applications Scotland Regulations 2022 came into force on April 1st, 2022. They replace the previous 2004 regulations and include new provisions that enable planning authorities to charge discretionary fees for services subject to council approval. Charging for pre-application advice is not uncommon. Many other local authorities across Scotland have introduced pre-application charges, including Edinburgh, Fife, Murray, West Lothian and Highland Council. Fees charged by authorities vary across the country, some as a percentage of the proposed planning application fee and some as a flat rate fee. The charging proposals are targeted at those areas where professional advice is required, particularly in a formal response. There is no change for non-specific or general pre-application advice that can be given over the phone or in person via an appointment. To be productive, pre-application advice needs commitment from all parties with the understanding that our resources are limited. Development management fees. The fee regulation waive fees in full as an exemption under Regulation 7. This is in terms of means of access, etc. for those disabled members of our community. And under Schedule 6, Article 7, Community Council benefit from a 50% fee reduction on planning applications. I'd just like to add that there is provision under Regulation 5 of the Town and Country Planning Regulations, which allows the officers to have discretionary powers in relation to applications where the primary purpose is a not-for-profit enterprise or a social enterprise, and where the development application is likely to contribute to improving health of our residents in the area to which the application relates to. So again, I think it's just important to highlight that officers still would have discretion for those applications that come forward from our community to reduce and potentially waive some of these fees. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I think it's a relatively straightforward paper, and it's seeking approval from the committee to introduce pre-application charges, which will contribute around £200,000 of additional income to the council and assisting in the council's budget gap. Charges are common across other local authorities, as we've heard, including Edinburgh, West Lothian and Fife. And the pre-application service has been operating for a number of years. They encourage early engagement with planning officers in advance of the planning application being determined at committee. And this early engagement is welcome by developers and officers alike and can smooth the process through to actually getting to approval. This paper also recognises that a charge is applied to the service and consider a number of planning charges related to certificate of lawfulness, discharging planning conditions, retrospective planning application surcharge, and any non-material variations considered and outlined in the Appendix 1 of the paper. Importantly, though, the new charges don't apply to general inquiries, as we've heard, and very much focus on interventions that require professional advice, often with a formal response, and those can be quite time-consuming for officers. Maintain the focus also on more formal requests that are chargeable and reducing the speculative inquiries that can take up often officers' time without any real outcome. Had assurances around the discretionary aspect for community applications and disabled applicants, where that does not disadvantage them in introducing this. So on that, I move the report from the executive, and I'm sure that if there's technical questions, Michael will be able to answer them, so don't ask me the technical ones. But thank you, Michael. And so again,
Happy to say.
thank you. I will open it up for questions or comments. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener. I just have a quick question for Michael. Michael, as far as the planning regime's concerned in Falkirk, is it self-financing at the moment?
No, I don't believe it is. There is cost to the council in delivering the service, but it's a very important service as we see growth and development across the area.
Is that something that you maybe envisage for the future though?
I think we're expecting some additional burden being placed through National Planning Framework 4 coming from Scottish Government. So we need to be aware of what additional duties we may have to deliver. So very conscious of that, and conscious of the limited capacity we do have as officers in deliberating and presenting applications for consideration. So I think there will be additional pressures on our service area. We do find also that there's difficulties in recruiting and finding planning officers across Scotland. So there's some challenges there in getting good officers to help us move forward applications as they come forward. So I suspect we'll be under more pressure as we go forward, and we welcome applications. Clearly, we want to see developments happen across the area, but I recognise that we have limited capacity and there will be additional pressures on officers in consideration of applications.
Thanks for that, Michael. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Tanner.
It's not so much a question as a comment. I'd like to commend the authors of this report for the clarity that has been laid out in a very clear, very easily understood manner, with the options, the benefits and the drawbacks clearly outlined in the appendix. So thank you very much for that. Thanks to the officers who have written this report.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah.
Okay. Don't see any other indications. So are we happy to do the report? Thank you. Item 11 is the national strategy for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. Is it Douglas yourself? Thank you.
It's Chair, yes. So the purpose of this report is to inform members of the Scottish Government's National Speed Strategy, which aims to ensure all appropriate roads in built-up areas have a speed limit of 20 miles per hour by 2025. This report also advises how the National Strategy will impact the Council's phased introduction of 20 mile per hour speed limits, as agreed at the Executive Committee meeting on 18th of January earlier this year. The Executive are asked to note that the Transport Scotland is gathering information from local authorities with respect to 20 mile per hour speed limits, after which it is anticipated that Transport Scotland will provide further guidance, information and funding, and a timetable for implementation. And that it agrees that implementing the Council's proposed 20 mile per hour speed limit in town centres and villages should be deferred until such new guidance on 20 mile per hour speed limits is issued. At its meeting the 18th of January earlier this year, the Executive agreed to progress 20 mile per hour speed limits in all towns and most village centres. Furthermore, the Executive agreed to proceed with a phased approach to the introduction of 20 mile per hour restrictions across the urban road network thereafter. As a result, work was undertaken to determine locations for 20 mile per hour traffic signs, which have now been purchased and are currently in storage. In early July 2022, Transport Scotland wrote to all local authorities, with workshops being held in August, requesting that a road assessment is undertaken by the end of March 2023 to inform the development of the national strategy for 20 miles per hour and ensure that a consistent method of assessment was undertaken across Scotland. The results of the road assessment will also be used to inform future policy and guidance on 20 mile per hour speed limits and ensure that a consistent approach in their implementation is taken nationally. In light of this guidance, officers believed it was necessary to come back to Council with a report updating on the change in national policy, the impact this would have for Falkirk Council, and the new proposed timeline for implementation. Transport Scotland have advised that implementing the strategy for 20 mile per hour speed limits would be undertaken in two phases. The first phase would be implementing 20 mile per hour speed limits, utilising 20 signs only, and this would be completed by the end of 2025. Thereafter, following evaluation and monitoring. Phase 2 may entail the introduction of speed reduction measures where data indicates this is required. The criteria for determining which roads should become 20 mph differs from guidance used in the preparation of the report considered at Executive earlier this year. Transport Scotland has made available £52,000 to the Council for undertaking the road assessments. Transport Scotland has requested details of the existing speed limits for built-up areas, towns, villages and any smaller settlements through which a road with a 30 mph speed limit passes. Transport Scotland has also requested local authorities undertake a review of the existing 20 and 30 mph speed limits against the given criteria. Each road in the Falkirk Council area, subject to a 30 mph speed limit, will be considered following the process provided by Transport Scotland. The assessment will also identify those roads which will remain at a 30 mph speed limit. The criteria advises that those roads which remain at 30 mph will typically be on A and B class roads with little frontage activity and where people walking, wheeling and cycling do not need to share space with motor traffic. Once the road assessments are complete, the evidence on the number of roads affected and the financial costs will be used to identify the most appropriate route to implement 20 mph speed limits, and this will be shared with the 20 mph task group. Implementation of any 20 mph speed limit or zone in the council area at this time and prior to the issue of any further guidance would not be advised, as it may lead to inconsistencies with the approach taken across Scotland. Officers will continue to be involved with the development of the strategy with Transport Scotland and provide updates to this committee as and when new information and any timescales for implementation of the strategy are provided. In conclusion, the Scottish Government has requested local authorities undertake a review of existing 20 and 30 mph speed limits against the given criteria. This criteria differs from the current guidance in that considering of existing vehicle speeds is no longer required. The assessments are likely to impact the Council's proposals for 20 mph speed limits, although it is not possible to determine the extent of this until further guidance is provided by the Scottish Government. That's a summary of the report, Chair.
Thank you for that, Douglas. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Douglas and David Main and the team for bringing this report forward. And it's as always, it's a very full resume from Douglas, and I don't want to add anything, so I would just be duplicating it. Just to highlight that I'm actually in this instance, I'm quite glad that we are further along with our project, because I do understand from the guidance here that it's a far fuller piece of work that's been asked for from the Scottish Government, and it would have maybe meant us having to take some of the signage out and put it in other places. So yeah, happy to move the recommendations here within the report.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah, content to second and reserve.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up for any comments or questions. Councillor Tatterson.
Hi, thank you for that report. It was really helpful, and whilst I do appreciate that the national strategy did delay what progress that we were making with implementing the 20 zones, just the fact that it's coincided now that a lot of primary schools are likely to lose their crossing guards as a result of cuts. Is there any scope for using what resources we do have at the moment to speed up the progress around schools, like a 1 mile buffer around schools, which I know may seem like it's complicating the process, but given the increased risk if schools are losing crossing guards, if we have signs ready to go, can we implement them prior to the national strategy being implemented?
Douglas.
Thanks for that question, Councillor. I think it'd be prudent to take a kind of holistic approach towards it, Councillor. I'll defer to David Maley, if you don't mind, who's more of a technical expert when it comes to the management of roads than myself.
Thanks, Douglas. Thanks, Councillor. As part of the initial assessment and the new criteria set out by the Scottish Government, schools and in the vicinity of schools is included within that criteria. So as part of this assessment that we're looking to undertake, that should be finalised by March 2023, will highlight areas within school vicinities. But prior to that, the work that we've previously done has not been abortive works, because that previous assessment also included where school areas were and where our part-time 20 mile per hour zones were. So once we complete the full assessment up to March, we can then make a decision if we know that certain areas are green in status. So as part of the new criteria, we need to red, amber, green status each of the roads. If we know that they're green and they'll be effectively self-enforcing areas, we can implement them sooner than the 2025 deadline. 2025 is the final deadline for implementation. So if we have great confidence in certain areas, we could look to implement that prior to the 2025 deadline. However, at this point, I couldn't give an exact timescale. We would have to wait for the conclusion of the initial assessment at March.
Thank you, David. I think
through you, convener, and I just wanted to touch on the school crossing controller aspect. All that has been agreed to date by executive is that we do a review of the 9 sites which don't meet the national statutory requirement for school crossing controllers. So I just want to reassure any parents who might be listening that there's absolutely no suggestion that school crossing controllers are going to be removed, and that all that's happening is a review to look, and it'll only be in instances whereby we believe there is a safe alternative route for pupils to get to school that we would come forward with a proposal. But I also think it's sensible that we maybe pause some of that activity to incorporate it into the school transport criteria review that's also being undertaken, so that those two aspects align with each other, and that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we review a site that then becomes not so easy to get to because of a school transport change. So we'll come back with a full update on that one, but just in the meantime, I just want everyone to be clear where we're at on that one.
thank you, Malcolm. That's a helpful reassurance. I've got Councillor Nimble, then Councillor Spears.
Thanks, Convener. Just a question for Douglas or David. I don't have a problem with the paper in general. I think 20 mile an hour is a worthy thing to take forward. But what discussions has there been with Police Scotland in relation to enforcement around this? Do Police Scotland have the resources to enforce this? That's another question. Thanks, Convener.
I'm happy to take this one, Douglas.
David.
Thanks, Councillor. Well, Police Scotland are actually part of the task group that came up with the proposals for the national strategy, along with, I think there's 9 other local authorities, Police Scotland, Scots and Sustrans. So they're well aware of the national proposals. When we did present the previous paper in January, we did put in there a risk that police had previously said that they would not have the resources to police 20 mile per hour limits at the time. But because we've got such a substantial shift in how the 20 mile per hours will be implemented now, I think the police have taken a different approach to that. And like I say, because they're part of the task group, they're well aware of this. But as we're progressing the work and we're undertaking the assessment, we'll understand the full implications of how much of the network will change to 20 mile per hours. And we will have that consultation with Police Scotland as well. So when we get an update on that, we can certainly come back and update you.
Right. Thanks for that, David. I think just going with the current speed restrictions, Police Scotland have really significant problems enforcing a 30 mile an hour limit, not to mention a 20. So they're going to have their hands tied significantly in trying to enforce this. That's correct. I don't think they're regularly patrolling 30 mile per hour limits as it stands. And if they change to 20, then, like I say, there's discussions that need to be had with Police Scotland and what resources they will be able to police this. Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Spears, and then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Mr. Benning for saying that there's a lot of different aspects need to be looked at regarding this. This is really regarding safe routes to schools, no car zones. I know we have difficulty in Grangemouth, but just renovated our park, Settling Park, and it's fantastic. But the access and egresses need double yellow lines. You know, there's a lot of other things that need to be adopted here. Just to bring in something saying a 20 mile per hour limit, doesn't it change the situation the cars are in? So there's a whole wider aspect that needs to be addressed here. And surely this is coming in because we want to safeguard children and elderly people against speeding cars. But we need to look at the whole access and egress into certain areas. So it's just really the start of something, and I'm glad to hear the director say that there's a whole lot of different aspects here, and we need to take them on board, and hopefully sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Councillor Spears. Councillor Hannah.
Likewise, I'd like to thank Mr. Binney for the assurances that this will be looked at in the round and all aspects be taken into account. I've dealt with a lot of complaints and inquiries from constituents, as have, I'm sure, every other councillor on this and this executive, about speeding cars in some of the local areas, about the problems that there are. So I think it is important that we look at this sooner rather than later, and that we look at all of these different aspects, including things like double yellow lines and so on, to make it safe, because it's not just about it being safe for people crossing the road, it's being safe enough to encourage parents to enable their children to walk to school rather than take some of the other routes that they might take. I know that in my area there are places where there's no continuous pavements, for example, so children have to cross the road more than once to get from their home to their school. So I think it's a number of different aspects, and I'm glad to hear that you're going to be looking into it, and look forward to hopefully early, since I think Douglas said that, or perhaps it was David said something, that the decision should be finalised in March 2023. There should be more clarity then. So I'm hoping that early in the spring we'll be able to have another report come with this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Convener. I don't know if this would be for David or Douglas. Is there towns and cities that have already got the 20 mile an hour limits in them?
Previously, there was certain local authority areas that had already implemented 20 mile per hour limits. We know our neighbouring authority, Stirling Council, have implemented some 20 mile per hour limits, and also Fife Council. And to date, it's been with a bit of mixed success. There's certain areas which have really helped, particularly in locations near schools. There's other local authorities where they have put the 20 mile per hour limits in, and they've had to go back and reverse that decision and put them back to 20 mile per hour, 30 mile per hour, sorry, because there was no change in driver behaviour, and the assessment that was carried out probably wasn't as full as what we're now being asked to do. So what we're now being asked to do is to risk assess every 30 mile per hour road and put it into a red, amber, green status. Green being the road will effectively be self-enforcing, so the mean speeds are already low. The amber warning to say that there's likely to be further monitoring required, and the red categories where we know that there's an existing speeding problem. And that's been the big major change from what the previous guidance told us to what we're getting told now. So that those red area roads will need further investment in the form of engineered traffic calming measures, whereas previously it was purely looking at the guidance which said that roads, these 20 mile per hour roads, should be self-enforced and should have a mean speed of approximately 24 miles per hour. Hence why councils were able to go on and implement those without any further engineering measures. So like I say, it's been a bit of mixed success between different local authority areas. However, this new national guidance looks to make it a more robust process.
That was the reason I was asking. And you answered my next question, what was the difference in the legislation that we had that I've been asked? Probably last question on that. £52,000 you spoke about. Does that help with the manpower you're using as a council? Does that money come off that? Or do we got to self-finance that?
Thanks, Councillor. That funding has been calculated by the Scottish Government. So they've took all 32 local authorities in Scotland and calculated the length of their urban road network and divided the portion of funding. I think it was 1.4 million across all local authorities. The urban road length that Falkirk Council has equated to £52,000 worth of funding to undertake the assessment. Because the assessment is a lot more involved than previously, and because we have a shorter deadline to March, we will be looking at external consultants to help undertake the assessment. It was detailed in the paper that there is a slight risk there that there could be the final cost of this could be slightly over the 52,000 of funding that we were given, but the Scottish Government will be looking for us to report back on that. So this 52,000 is to cater for the initial assessment of our urban road network, which will then feed back into the Scottish Government and help them inform their updating of the Good Practice Guide. And we will have further consultation with Transport Scotland and Scottish Government in terms of how we take that forward for implementation and what further funding will become available.
Thanks, David. The last bit you just said there is very important, the climate that we're in for the funding, because of being an awful lot of, once this has been agreed to implement, an awful lot of work for signs and manpower. So as a council, that's something that we spoke about all day. Money's very tight, so I can't wait until it's implemented. A lot of my areas, my past areas, have been shouting for this for ages and ages, especially Councillor Parsons says round about the school areas, which is very welcome. So thank you very much, David and Douglas. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. Yeah, if there are no other contributions, I'd be happy to read the report. Okay, thank you. Item 12 is the introduction of short-term licensing scheme. Gosh, it's late in the afternoon to be saying that. And I'll go to Mr. Moody.
Thank you, convener. And this report presents for members' consideration a policy which allows for local implementation of the new national licensing scheme for short-term lets. And maybe to give the short-term lets a more recognisable shorthand, this is the licensing scheme which aims at licensing Airbnb site accommodation, and that's broadly how it's been discussed in some of the national reporting of the new licensing system. And I think the first thing to emphasise is that most of the requirements of the new system are within the legislation, and those core requirements are robust and will ensure the accommodation of this kind, once licensed, is of a reasonable standard and is safe. The choices which are within the gift of the council in approving its policy are not of such a core significance to the licensing system, but some of those are set out within the report itself, and they've also been the subject of the consultation which has taken place over 2 stages in advance of this report being presented to you. And in the interest of transparency, all the consultation responses are appended to the back of the report. If I can summarise the approach which officers are recommending to you in response to the consideration of the consultation, it's to, I think, to try and avoid layering on additional regulatory requirements onto those running Airbnbs, additional to those which are already within the core national system, which are in themselves robust. That's reflected in the sets out some of that thinking in relation to additional conditions and on the issue of literacy levels and who counts as a child. The other decision which you are being asked to take in relation to the policy is to set the level of fees, and the fee level has been set to do no more than cover the cost of actually administering the licensing applications as they arise. So there's no effort, I think, to try and gain money on the back of this particular area of trade. I think people will have seen in the national coverage that in some parts of the country, the proliferation of Airbnb type accommodation has thrown up some difficulties and some concerns for local populations. The assessment which has been made in the preparation of this policy, and this comes from speaking to other council colleagues across other services, and also from reacting to the consultation responses, is that the same type of issues don't arise within the Falkirk Council area, and to some extent the availability of the level of Airbnb accommodation that there is here is seen as a benefit. For instance, on being a useful facility for encouraging tourism within the area, which is one of the council's goals in terms of economic regeneration. So, Convener, the information is, I hope, laid out clearly in the report, and the recommendations are as set out in paragraph 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Councillor Dry?
Yeah, thank you, Convener, and thank you, Colin and Brian and team, for putting this report together and presenting it to us today. I just want to be quite brief and just to highlight a couple of things within the report. This is to ensure that short-term lets are safe and address any issues that neighbours may have. It also aims to balance out, as Colin said, the economic and benefits of short-term lets in this area. We have carried out 2 consultations for online, and we've had the responses which are also in the report. And just to highlight when it comes to the fees, I know there is some speculation around that, but it's just to highlight that we would like to, it's just basically cost recovery for this, and I'm happy to move to the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Boyd?
On the second,
Okay, thank you. I will open it up for any questions or comments from members. Councillor Steinwright?
Thank you, Convener. No issues with the report I presented. Thank you very much, Colin, for being clear and concise. I think my question was just on the administrative costs you referred to. In the implementation of the scheme, will there be any fixed or sort of overhead costs which would not change with demand? Considering you're sort of suggesting that whilst there will be a certain degree of administration to be done, it might not be at the same volume as other places that where the scheme has, let's say, taken up more time and attention, how it was implemented. But the chat-up has been perhaps more controversial than this section will be in other towns. And my second issue is I do know the scheme in some implementation has run into some issues tailored to the geography and unique characteristics. Is there anything, how are we going to monitor if Falkirk, for example, does take on a volume of larger events, as we saw the Killers concert and various other events that may come to our town? How are we going to monitor the implementation of the scale and potential administrative bottlenecks at specific occasions? Thank you.
Thank you. Colin?
There are no specific fixed costs other than the existing staffing costs within the team, and they deal with a whole range of licensing applications, so this will be dealt with as part of the everyday workload. We have, I think, undertaken some minor expansion within the team on a temporary basis to attempt to deal with the anticipated flow of license applications which will arise. That's not at a great scale in monetary terms or in terms of numbers of people. So it's something we'll keep and monitor as the demand arises. And just in terms of how we'll fix the administrative cost, it's in part based on just the experience on operating some of the other licensing systems. some of which are similar to that which we have here. In relation to the issue of large-scale events, there is an opportunity within the system to have temporary exclusion from the licensing requirement, which I think is primarily aimed at events of the scale of, for instance, the Edinburgh Festival, so where there is very large-scale demand, and it might come across a period longer than I think that which is transitory maybe for a single concert. But it is something which we will look at as the system develops. It's a brand new licensing system, and I think we're not wholly certain how it will operate in practice. So this policy, I think, is not intended to be a tablet of stone, and we'll keep it under review. And if there are changes which require to be brought, then we'll go back before the executive.
Thank you, Colin. Any other Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, Minister. Quick question. What committee will this fall on the civic licence?
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. I'll see no further indications. Are we content to approve?
Agreed.
Thank you. And I'll go on straight now. The final few items of the very important items. Item 13 is the projected financial position 22-23, and Daniel Kearney is going to take this one.
Thank you, Convener. This is the third update report from the executive on the projected outcome against the 22-23 revenue budget. The report covers both the general fund and the housing revenue account. Financial pressures that were acute with the general fund. Appendix 1 summarises the projected position. Paragraph 5.1.2 highlights key points that should be taken into account looking at that index. Overall, the projected position is an overspend against budget of 1.8 million. This will result in a call on reserves of 6.8 million, of which 5 million was originally budgeted for. Main area of pressure is children's services, with pressures in education and social work. These pressures are set out in paragraphs 5.111 to 5.120 of the report. These overspends are offset by underspends and other services in place, transformation communities and corporate services, and reduced capital charges. Undoubtedly, this position will move over the coming months. The most volatile areas are teachers' pay. The award for this financial year is not settled, and the ongoing strike activity will impact on the financial outturn. There's ongoing and sustained pressures in the children and families budget, and energy costs remain volatile. In addition, discussions are ongoing with the IGB in respect of pay award funding. Overspend of 1.8 million assumes that no pay award funding is passed to the IGB. The rationale for this assumption is set out in paragraphs 5.130 to 5.133. At this stage, it is anticipated that the IGB can afford to meet the pay award and still achieve a break-even position in the current financial year. I would highlight to the executive that if the pay award funding was to be passed to the IGB, this could result in an additional 1.2 million of cost for the council, taking the overspend against budget to 3 million, with an 8 million call on the council's reserves. Section 5.3 of the report sets out the approved savings position, and this hasn't changed since last up to members. Section 5.4 of the report provides detail on general fund reserves, with no significant changes since the previous report, and a summary of reserves is included in Appendix 2. Workforce changes are shown in section 5.5. I would note that paragraph 5.5.2 sets out the actions to minimise staffing costs. This has been supplemented by the introduction of the recruitment fees. A revised process is in place to consider the recruitment of any posts not included in the exemptions list. The housing revenue account is presented in Appendix 5, showing that the HRA remains on budget. There are significant movements between various budget headings, which are explained in paragraph 5.6.2 to 5.6.3. As previously noted, it is important that members understand that this position continue to move before financial year end. The economy remains volatile and there are still significant uncertainties within the projection. Further update report will be presented to members before the year end and duly reported. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Danny. Well, we have seen a slight improvement with the gap next year having slightly reduced. We've done an overspend spend position for this year, only the improvements is the result of some of the interventions, such as the recruitment fees that we've had. But these will be short term and until such time as a final decision is made about that longer term financial strategy. But we still have a significant gap to meet, and with a continued overspend, and the position is still likely to be very volatile going forward. We know that, as Danny's outlined, there's a number of areas of volatility that we don't know the outcomes. Therefore, it's very, very difficult to predict what our final position will likely to be, or indeed where we might be by the time we get to our March budget. But we have to take the best estimations of where we are, and that's what's been the paper before us. I'm comfortable that officers are taking as many interventions as possible to reduce the continued overspend. But with areas, particularly in the children's services, that is very much a needs-led, then it's very difficult to be able to predict where we might actually find a final need. But it does just reflect the significant financial pressures that not just Falkirk Council, but all councils across the country have been. We'd be asked to note the report and instruct service directors to take appropriate actions to maintain their costs within the approved budget, and focus on essential spend only. I'm confident that that's being carried out. So, in the interest of time, I'm happy to move the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Convener. After a second, reserve.
Thank you. I'll open up for any questions in relation to the projected financial position. Members? No, consent to. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Sorry, Alan. Yes, Adamo.
I'm just trying to take myself off mute there, Convener. No, thanks for that. Can I just ask a question in relation to the IGB and the pay award circumstances? Are we not duty bound to pass on this funding to the IGB? Now, I've also heard the argument that the IGB has reserves, but they seem to be accounted for, so they'll not be able to draw on them. Can maybe get some comments from officers in relation to that?
Mrs. Algie is going to take that.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. You will see that there is a letter in from the Deputy First Minister, and that will be in the papers. It's going to Council next week. I think the pack for that is out already, so you will have access to that. When you have a look at that pack, you'll see a letter that's in there that now gives us discretion in some areas to apply spend where it is most needed. And that can be interpreted in different ways, but certainly our interpretation of that, and in line with a number of other councils, we're not alone in this interpretation, is that would give us the ability to adjust that funding for the IGB in terms of the pay award, and that we can withhold that based on the level of reserves. But I would stress that discussions are still ongoing with IGB colleagues just to work that through, and we're not bringing a recommendation to you at this point in terms of that actual decision. It's still being worked through and still discussed.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Is there a note? If there's no one else, I'm happy to be.
Great.
Thank you. Item 14 is the capital programme update, and it's back with Danny.
Thank you again, Convener. This report provides members with an update of the projected capital spend for both the general fund and the housing revenue account. As in previous reports, section 5.1 provides information on risks and uncertainties that impact on the capital programme. And these are significant key factors, include inflation, interest rate volatility, and supply chains issues within the economy. These issues may impact on the affordability of the capital programme moving forward for both the general fund and the housing revenue account. For the general fund, the projection shows an underspend of 2.7 million against budget, an estimated spend of 42.1 million. Appendix 1 shows this in more detail. It is a much improved position than previous years and provides some comfort that the actions taken through the Best Value Action Plan have been effective. However, is a caution that risk remains in the system, which is just previously outlined in terms of inflation, interest rates, supply chain issues. Paragraphs 5.2.2 to 5.2.5 provides information on areas of spend and areas of slippage within the general fund programme. Section 5.44 covers the housing revenue account capital programme. It also shows in Appendix 2. Spend is expected to be around 61 million against a budget of 72 million. Areas of spend are shown in paragraph 5.4.1. Movements between the investment areas are explained in paragraph 5.4.3. We draw members' attention to the last bullet point in respect of property buybacks, with 9.1 million of property buybacks in the forecast. It's a very positive position with buyback. It's a very effective way for the council to increase its housing stock. Appendix 3 includes the projected prudential indicators for the council shown against budget. Section 5.6 and 5.7 make the link between capital activity and treasury management activity, not least the borrowing plan for the council. Borrowing will be made up not only of investment activity this year with the capital programme, but also replacement of debt due to be repaid. The cash balances are high, this debt will not be replaced in the current financial year. At this stage, it's projected that borrowing will not be required until near the end of the financial year, but we will try to arrange borrowing now, starting January to March, as much as possible. As ever, in terms of that borrowing that is undertaken, this will be discussed with our Treasury advisors and a full range of options assessed. And on that note, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Danny. Again, following the review of the capital programme which was taking place just in September, we have seen some movements and benefits. We've seen a reduction in slippage and likely to deliver on our spend, but again, because of the volatility of financial climate right now, there still continues to be pressures, and our capital programmes will continue to be challenging going forward. I don't think I really want to say much more than that in relation to the capital programme. It is a report that's for noting to where we are, and hopefully by the time we get to the next quarter's report, we'll be able to have a better assessment of where things are and projections for the future. But I'm happy to move the recommendations. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Convener. Just a small bit on this. There's obviously still significant challenges in the capital world of finance at the moment, whether it be supply, whether it be contractors, or whatever. I've got to say that the general fund is, I know it's still slippage, but they've only slipped by a very small amount. And that's a credit to the officers. I don't think that should go missed, because it is really tough at the moment trying to get people to do things for you at this moment in time, and that follows through into the HRE's capital as well. It's really tough at this moment in time getting skilled tradespeople, and there's a number of reasons for that, which I'm not going to go into at this moment in time. I think I've probably covered most of them in previous occasions, but it's I've got to say the increase on buybacks is a good move, and again, I say, are done to the housing team, have taken positive action in that to increase our housing stock, because we need as many houses as we can possibly get. With that, I am pleased, and I've not said that for a long time, on these reports. I'm pleased to second this report.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. And I'll open up some comments in relation to that programme. Councillor Dundee.
It's just a quick question on section 7.9. It says that future projects will be required to demonstrate how carbon reduction can be achieved or carbon emissions offset in line with the climate emergency and its work to achieve net zero emissions by 2030. But in the strategic vision, it also mentions our 2045 target is area-wide emissions. Wouldn't it be sensible when doing capital programs to be aiming for both targets at the same time?
Okay, is Michael still there? I know that we have, as a council, we have in 2019 we agreed for ourselves the target of 2030. Michael?
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't catch the question. Apologies.
Yeah, so in the report section 7.9, it says that future projects will have to pass tests to ensure it reduces carbon emissions to reach the 2030 target. But we also have the 2045 target, which is area-wide emissions. Wouldn't it be better for projects to pass both those tests to make sure that we're not duplicating spending past 2030?
Yeah, Councillor, absolutely. So as we progress projects, we need to look at the carbon budgeting element of each of these projects, particularly in terms of our larger capital projects, which through the Green Book requirements, we will be looking at the actual carbon footprint that that particular project is contributing towards the council area. So as we progress projects, whether that's through revenue or primarily through capital, we'll get a better understanding of exactly what implications are for our carbon footprint and our drive towards net zero. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Anyone else? No. Okay, we're happy to read the report.
Okay.
Everybody's obviously getting tired. Final report for the afternoon is item 15 is asset surplus operational requirements. And Paul Keswick's taking this one. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of the report is to declare surplus to requirements 3 properties which are former Larbert Day Nursery, Larbert, Victoria Buildings in Falkirk, and the former Park Street Community Education base in Falkirk. The details of these properties are outlined in the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul and Mr. Dillman.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this was agreed with the Education of Children and Young People back in the 21st of June 2022, and they were deemed surplus to requirement. I think everybody knows these properties very well, and we've heard today how important it is to move on with the SPR, and this certainly does that. Disposal of these properties will achieve capital, much needed capital receipts, and reduce revenue costs. Happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Garner, and I'm happy to second this report, and I'll open up any questions. Comments now? Okay, happy to read. Thank you, and that brings us to the end of today's executive. Thank you everybody for their contributions, and thank you for forgiveness and the recesses, etc.